Please be seated. The court is now back in session. This afternoon, the chamber will hear the testimony of TCW 694. Court officer, could you invite the witness TCW 694 and his duty counsel into the courtroom? Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I'd like to ask you some initial information. Can you tell us your name? Response: my name is Suong Sikun, alias Kung or Thon. Thank you. Mr. Witness, please pause a bit after my question until you see the red light on your microphone so that your response will go through the system. Can you tell us your date of birth? I was born on the 15th December 1936. Where is your present address? Currently, I live in Kamalspien village, Malay sub-district, Malay district, Banteay Meanchey province. What is your current occupation? I am retired. What is the name of your father? His name is Sungka. He is deceased. And your mother's name? Her name is Nuren. She is also deceased. What is your wife's name? Her name is Tang Hui Ain. How many children do you have? My current wife has one child. What about from the previous marriage? I had 4 children from the previous marriage. One passed away. Mr. Sung Sikun, based on the report from the greffier, to the best of your knowledge, you do not have any relationship by blood or by marriage to any of the parties or the civil party, or to the accused Nuon Chea Ieng Sari or Kieu Sampon. Is this information accurate? Yes. Also, as reported by the greffier, you already took an oath on the 1st of August 2012. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Mr. Sung Sikun, as a witness, we shall inform you of your right and responsibility. As a witness in the proceeding before this chamber, you can object to not to respond to any question or make any comments which would incriminate yourself, meaning that if your comments or response would lead you to possible prosecution. You are also given through the Visual Unit Duty Council, who will assist you in exercising your right before this chamber. Do you understand the right that I just mentioned? Yes, I do understand my right. Also, along with the right, you have the obligation to testify before this chamber, as you shall respond to the questions put to you either by the chamber or by any of the parties to the proceeding, unless your response or comment may incriminate you, as I stated in your right earlier. And you shall only answer the truth that you have heard, you have seen or experienced. Personally, in regards to the events posed to you through questions or put to you by the chamber or by any other parties. Mr. Sung Sikun, have you been interviewed by investigators of the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges? Yes. I made 2 interviews in 2007 and also in 2009 before the Co-Investigating Judges. How many times were you interviewed by the Co-Investigating Judges? Was it 2 times? Yes, 2 times. Can you recall the locations where the interviews took place? It was here in this compound. Were the interviews taken place here in the compound of the ECCC? Yes. Prior to your appearance before this chamber, have you reviewed or read your written records of interview made with the investigators in order to recollect your memory? Yes, I read the statements. To your best recollection and knowledge, the record of interviews that you just read, are they consistent with the statements you made with those investigators? Yes, they are. Thank you. The Chamber would like to inform the prosecution that for the process of hearing the testimony of this witness, the prosecution will be given the first opportunity to question this witness before other parties. You may wait for a moment. Court officer informs the chamber that you have some health issue that you need to make a frequent trip to the bathroom. Please indicate to the chamber by raising your hand if you wish to visit the bathroom. Please do so, for example, after your response to a question, not in the middle of the question and answer session, so that it's not going to interrupt the question and answer session. And you do not need to worry about switching on and off the microphone. It will be operated by the AV booth. So when you need to use the bathroom, please raise your hand and notify the chamber. We also prepare a yellow sticky note. You may use it to indicate or to get attention of the chamber if you want to use the bathroom during the proceeding. We understand that due to your elderly age. The prosecution, you may proceed. Chandra Resmay. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Jonas. Good afternoon, everyone. And good afternoon, Mr. Sosikun. My name is Chandra Resmay, the Deputy Prosecutor at the ECCC. I have some questions for you, and then my international colleague will also question you. Let me first ask you regarding your name. The alias that you mentioned to the President just then, Kung and Thun, when did you start using these aliases? The alias Kung was used when I joined the Communist Party of Cambodia in Malay. That name was known in Malay and Pailan. As for the alias Thun, that was my revolutionary name when I used in Koh Kong. Thank you. Besides Kung and Thun aliases, do you have any other revolutionary names? No. Why Do you use the alias Kung or Thund during the revolution? Kung and Thund are one and the same. It means lasting forever in Khmer. It was Intieret who gave me the name of Kung, which means lasting forever, or Kung Vung in Khmer. And during my life period of resistance, I used that alias, and I survived. And I mentioned that as well in my book. In documents, as I observed, there are various names or aliases for the Khmer Rouge cadres. Can you tell us why there is a need to use a different name or alias during the revolutionary movement? It is easy to understand. During the complicated revolutionary movement and resistance, cadres usually moved from one location to another, and once they moved to another location, they chose another alias for the purpose of avoiding being tracked down by the enemy. And that was the principle of the movement of the CPK, that is, we have to keep secret, and if we could maintain secrecy, it means we have won 50% already of the victory. Now I move on to another subject regarding your biography prior to April 1975. First, in relation to your education. Can you describe to the chamber which schools you attended? I attended a Presiano College in Kapong Cham, that is in Chlong district. And then I went to another college in Chlong. And after, I went to the Presiano College in Kampong Cham and to Cambodia Board College in Phnom Penh, and later on at the Lycée Sisawat in Phnom Penh. After that, I went to study in France in 1957 via a scholarship from the French government, and that was for my study in civil aviation. At that time, I also took my exam in the French secondary in Paris. And after that, I studied in a university in Paris, that is Sorbonne. And Sorbonne, I received my baccalaureate in French literature, and later on my master's degree also in French literature. Later on, I became a candidate member for the political studies in French. However, I gave up that study as I had to have a heart surgery in 2004. during the course of your study in France or in Cambodia or in both, did you ever join any political activity? If yes, which party, which political party? Response. While I was studying in Chlong district, the director of the school, who was also my teacher, and as I stayed at his house, that is called Sarun, his name, he was the director of the Democratic Party with the symbol of the head of the elephant. So I joined that party while I was about 13 or 14 years old. I joined the youth group, propagandized for that Democratic Party. And later on, I joined the People's Movement of Sơn Ngọc Thanh. At that time, I tried to flee from being arrested by the government, so I fled into the jungle in Kampong Speu with Chan Rang Say, that's the prince. And after the Geneva Convention, as I was sentenced to engage in heavy work for 20 years. But after the 1954 Geneva Convention, it was expunged, and I studied in the third class at a private college in called Cambodia Board, and at that time, Hu Jun was the principal of that college, and Mai Man was my teacher. I received my baccalaureate from that school, and then I went to study at the Lycée Sisawat in Phnom Penh. The President. The prosecutor, for your next questions, please try to distinguish the status of the witness. The witness here, the person is here as a witness, not as an accused. Try to pose your question related to the facts mentioned in the closing order. Otherwise, the response may be too far and out of the scope of the closing order. You spent almost half an hour already, and nothing is really relevant to the portion of the closing order. Prosecutor. Mr. Sung Si-kun, can you tell us if you made Ieng Sari prior to the event in April 1975? Response. I met Ieng Sari upon his return from France. As I recall, it was in early 1957. At that time, I wanted to join the covert assistance movement within the framework of the Communist Party of Cambodia. At that time, the CPK was not yet established because the movement was still covert. I met him twice as I stayed at the former student association along the Pasteur Road. At that time, Ieng Sari met me at that location and consented through my request as a secret member of that resistance. Thank you. While you were in France, was you familiar with the Marxist-Leninist circle? Response. While I was studying in France on the 18th of October 1957, Ieng Sari sent me a letter in order to give it to Khieu Samphan in Paris. I clearly recall it. That was the time that Khieu Samphan was hospitalized. At the Université Internationale de Paris. I did not know the content of that letter. However, after receiving the letter, Khieu Samphan accepted me as a member of the Marxist-Leninist circle in Paris. What was the purpose of the establishment of the so-called Marxist-Leninist circle? Documents also indicate that the founder were Ieng Sari, Tu Samut, and Cây Van Sat. These were the three founders. What was the main objective of this Marxist-Leninist circle? I do not know clearly the real objective of this Marxist-Leninist circle. However, in practice, I knew that the primary objective was to study from the Marxist-Leninist doctrine, and secondly, it was a movement in order to prepare for the formation of a party. For example, regarding the organization of the disciplined, the daily life living, so that we could qualify ourselves as a communist. Thank you. What was the reason for you to join that Marxist-Leninist circle? Response. I was born in a poor peasant family. I thought of my mother, who couldn't even have a proper clothing for going to a pagoda, and our living throughout the year could not even afford our living and eating. We had to borrow it from other people. That kind of anger is still burning in my heart, and that it started from my childhood. At that time, our country was under the colony of France. Our country was under a regime which, under the eyes of the French colony, though not a real puppet, but a regime which served that French colony. And this hatred, this anger, made me think of trying to find a way in order to contribute to liberate my country from that French colony. And that was the reason I joined the Democratic Party with the Prince Sisawat Sitivong, who was the president of that party then. However, the Democratic Party failed to respond to the need that I have in regards to the social justice. For that reason, I turned to the communist doctrine, that is the Marxist-Leninist doctrine, that would be able to rescue my country from the hand of the oppressed regime and from the colony. And that thinking was while I was still a youth, but it is not my present thinking.
The President, Mr. Co-Prosecutor, could you please be reminded that your questions should only be framed to fall within the ambit of the alleged facts in the closing order only. The information the witness just responded to you is nothing important for the chamber to consider as property value for the judicial proceedings, and questions like this had already been asked before the co-investigating judges. We are here before the chamber to find evidence of proof concerning the alleged facts against the accused person in the closing order, and please do not treat the witness as he is an accused. Please make sure that you are not mistaken. Co-prosecutor, thank you, Mr. President. Before I proceed to another topic, which is about the National United Front of Cambodia, I was asking the previous questions because I would like to establish the linkages between the background and my follow-up questions. I would like now to proceed to the National United Front of Cambodia. Mr. Sikun, I would like now to put the questions as follows. If you can, please tell the court about the activities of the FUNC in China. Did you engage in any of its activities? Response: yes, I did. I was involved in establishing the FUNC in China, and I was elected by the meeting as the secretary of the Central Committee for that front. Question: what was your motive behind joining this front? Response: the National United Front of Cambodia was established in the aftermath of the coup d'etat staged by Marshal Lonel, or General Lonel, who toppled down the legitimate leader, who was then Prince Norodom Sihanouk. And the front was established to free ourselves from the Lonel yoke, and this is the way we would like to free ourselves. Question: when did you join the front? Response: the National United Front of Cambodia was established after the appeal of King Norodom Sihanouk on the 23rd of June 2000, the 23rd of March 1970, and we all together agreed the idea of establishing the National United Front of Cambodia or Cambodia, and I was elected as the representative to lead the Khmer Students Union. And at that time, we supported the chairmanship of then Prince Norodom Sihanouk, who was in Peking. Question: did you join the front voluntarily or were you compelled? Response: I joined this movement voluntarily. The Khmer Students Union was formed by the progressive students, and the decision was made voluntarily. And we, as national, the youth who were patriotic, were very concerned of the fate of our country. Question: did Mr. Ieng Sary conduct any meetings for the Fung in Peking? Response: Mr. Ieng Sary was in Peking not in his capacity as the leader of the Fung. He was in Peking as the representative of an internal party of the resistance movement in Cambodia. So he represented the movement in Cambodia. Question: in which circumstance that you became member of the Communist Party of Cambodia? Response: I became the full right member of the CPK in 1971. Question: was there any ceremony where you were inducted into the CPK? If it was, who chaired such ceremony? Response: at that time, the ceremony was held at Mr. Ieng Sary's house in Peking, and the person who vouched for me as the member of the party at that time was there were two people. I don't recall them. Perhaps there were Mr. Kiet Chun and Chun Prosit, and the ceremony was chaired by Mr. Ieng Sary. Question: before you were inducted into the CPK, had you done anything or shown any position to convince them to introduce you into the member as the member of the party? Response: to respond to that question, I may have to go back a little bit, because this movement was a resistance movement, political one, in Cambodia at that time. The resistance movement was part of the progressive people in the Democratic Party, and this force was joined by the elderly or the senior people. Elderly, I rather say. I am not impolite when I refer to elderly people here, because the old people. And there was contradiction or disagreement concerning the movements, resistance movement of Vietnamese, Viet Minh. members of the Democratic Cambodia who supported Sơn Ngọc Thanh were determined not to join the Viet Minh resistance movement. They treated the movement as that of the French colonial movement. So we were of the opinion that the common enemies of our people, of Cambodian people and Vietnamese people and the Laotian people were the French colony. So we had only one enemy and we had to join hands equally and fraternally to fight the French. Later on, the movement was split into two. On one part, it was a movement called the People's Movement led by Sơn Ngọc Thanh, and then another movement was led by Marshal Lionel, backed by the Americans. Rather, this is part of the first movement, and another movement was the movement found by intellectuals from France, including Mr. Chuan Mom Keng Van Sa. Question: in the line of the CPK, there was at times when enemy of the party was discussed. How could one identify enemies of the party and the general enemies? Response: Mr. President, I do not think I understand the question. Co-prosecutor: Mr. President, I may repeat. Could you tell the court or describe the differences between the enemies of the CPK or the enemies of the people of Cambodia? So, according to the CPK's line, what kind of people treated as enemies? You say that there are a lot of good things stated in the statute of the party, but could you tell us in detail how enemies were classified? Response: the enemies of the CPK at that time were the American imperialists and their internal henchmen. That's the first category of enemies. And the second category was the landlords, the comprador, those who supported the American imperialists. In the comprador class, there were people who also were nationalists, who loyal to the country, that the CPK didn't treat them as enemies, but some were allies of the American imperialists. Question: when Mr. Ieng Sary was in Peking, what was his function? Response: he was a representative representing internal movement within the country at that time. He was representing first a resistance movement for China as well, and secondly he was representing mainly he was attached to then Prince Norodom Sihanouk to unite all forces within and outside the country to continue the resistance movement to free the country from the French colonial, from the Khmer Republic government backed by the American imperialists. Question. Can you also clarify whether CPK had any representative abroad in April 1975? Response. I recall that we had a representative of the CPK from North Vietnam, and also for the CPK in Cambodia, Mr. Ieng Sary was the representative. Question. Who was representing the North Vietnam in Peking at that time? Response. That's all I recall. I know that Mr. Ieng Sary was representing the CPK in North Vietnam and in Peking. I don't know other things other than this. Question. When did Mr. Ieng Sary return to Peking? Indeed, he came to Cambodia and then he returned to Peking. When was his last trip to Peking before he returned to Phnom Penh or Cambodia? Response. Mr. President, I would like Mr. Prosecutor to be precise on his question because he went to China on several occasions. I'm not clear in which period he was talking about. Co-prosecutor. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to skip this and move to another question. I would like to refer to the Khmer Information Agency or AKE. Did you ever engage in the activities of the AKI? From 1970 to 1974, before I came back to the country, I was representing the AKI in China. Question. Who was the head of the information office at the AKI? Response. Frankly, I don't know. I only know that this information agency, the information relevant to this was sent to me from Hanoi through the North Vietnamese embassy to Peking. Question. What about the information office of the FUNC? Who was the chairperson of that information office of the FUNC? Response. The head of that office in Peking was I myself. Question. What was the function of this information office of the FUNC? Response. It was an organization broadcasting information from the battlefront, internal battlefields, and activities or diplomatic activities that are supporting the movement of the FUNC and the GRUNC chaired by Prince Norodom Sihanouk. Question. What about the AKI? What was its role in the FUNC? Response. The AKI was not somehow relevant to the FUNC. It was a section assigned, although I don't know very clearly, not as an organization appointed by a political office of the FUNC itself. Question. Was AKI involved anything in the movement of the CPK? Response. Regarding the roles of AKI, the roles were not different from those of the FUNC. It was to broadcast information of the movement and diplomatic activities and to gather supports from abroad to fight the American imperialists and their henchmen. Question. According to your experience and what you have heard, you have learned during the time you stayed in France, did you ever see any Cambodians abroad who attended or who joined the CPK's movement there? Response. At that time, CPK was not yet established. It was when I was in France. There was no information that such establishment was in place. But there were two organizations or a gathering Khmer immigrants abroad, in particular in Europe, the Marxist-Leninist Circle and the Khmer Students' Union, led by Mr. Khieu Samphan. And we got support from students and intellectuals, and the support was overwhelming from students in Belgium, the European countries, and also Russia. Question. You said that there were bulletins. Were these bulletins sent to a foreign country, and what was the motive of sending such bulletins abroad? Response. The bulletins were sent to France for sure, because after the establishment of the FUNC in France, there was an office, what we call the mission office of the FUNC in Paris. At that time, there was Mr. In Sikan and Auk Sukun who became the heads of the office. Question. In the bulletins of the AKI, before these bulletins were published, could you tell the chamber who revised, edited the content of the text before they weren't published? Response. These texts were prepared by our group, by my group, and people who edited the text were from the political office of the FUNC, whose members were Chun Mom and Chun Prasit. Thank you, says the co-prosecutor. At the information office of the FUNC and the AKI, in these both organizations, who had the authority to make a decision on the policy concerning publishing or broadcasting? Response: no one made the decision because it was meant to publicize the information to others, and we gathered or collected information from the inside and the diplomatic activities from various embassies abroad. This information combined and compiled and put into a text so that it could be printed and published twice a week. Question: did Prince Norodom Sihanouk and his group ever engage in the activity of the information related activity? Response: at that time, the king was, or the prince was the head. Whatever the prince would like us to print, we had to follow. And we had no intention to hide anything from him. Politically, we had no intention to keep anything from being published if these were from the prince.
Who's leaders of the CPK who attended in the affairs of the information? As far as I know, there was none. Ian Seri had nothing to do with the information. Who was the most responsible for the text published by the AKI? Mr. President, I'd like the prosecutor to clarify the question. When you talk about the most responsible, legally, I was the most responsible as I was the director of the AKI. Or you can say also the political office of the FUNC. That is Chun Mom or Chun Prasit. Thank you, Mr. President. He already responded to my question. During your stay in Beijing, what other offices or roles did you take? Besides being the director of the information office of the FUNC, I was also a member of the FUNC in China with Dung Samol was the chair, and I was in charge of security. Thank you. Can you tell us who was in charge of the military in the CPK at that time? I do not know. Did you ever work as an interpreter for the leadership during your stay in Beijing? No. Because the affairs dealt exclusively with the Chinese, and they did have their interpreters to interpret into the Khmer language. Thank you. Did you ever accompany any leaders for their overseas visit? I accompanied to Africa, to Romania, and a few other countries of the then Prince Sihanouk, and I traveled with Ieng Sari. And later, in 1974, I also accompanied for a trip to Africa, Albania, Yugoslavia, Romania, with Kisampon. At that time, he was the Deputy Prime Minister and the Commander-in-Chief. You said you was in charge of security in the Funk. In that role, what kinds of tasks did you undertake? At that time, there were not many activities, and we were in China, which was a sovereign country. Amongst the Cambodian people, however, the Chinese government would not be able to interfere with our affairs. But it might have an impact on the security in China. For example, in 1971, Cai Qing, who was the son of Cai Mi, then the ambassador to China, Cai Chiu, was a bodyguard of Prince Sihanouk for his visit to a weapon manufacturing facility in Xinjiang province in North China, and Cai Qing provided the information regarding the location of that factory to the Italian embassy in China. The Chinese got that proof, and without the presence of the Funk, he would have been arrested because they had proof of he breaching that information. So they contacted us to deal with that security issue. And as a committee of the Funk in China, we decided to detain Cai Qing and to question him. Later on, the senior leadership of the Chinese government decided to release him. On the other hand, in another instance, which occurred in 1972, Princess Kosama was sick and hospitalized in China, and Notchum, who accompanied the princess, passed this secret information to the English authority in Hong Kong, which interfered with the internal security of the Chinese government. The Chinese demanded us to resolve the issue, And as a result, we decided to detain him and question him. And as in the case of Kai Chiang, he was released. Regarding the arrest of individuals, did the cadres or members of the CPK, or as a member of the CPK, did you ever issue or made a decision, or did you have the authority to decide on the arrest of any member of the CPK back then? Response. Mr. President, I'd like the prosecutor to clarify regarding the date. Questioned. That is the event prior to April 1975. I want to know, as a person responsible for security, did you have the authority to decide or to issue an order for the arrest of any individual or any member of the CPK? Response. I undertook the role for security within the framework of the FUNC. I did not have the authority to make any arrest within the circle of the CPK. Thank you. Questioned. Within the FUNC, did you have the authority to decide on the arrest of any member of the FUNC? Response. As a person responsible for security, I did not have that authority because the FUNC in China had the chairperson. Also, they had the chairperson throughout the country that was then Prince Sihanouk, and I did not have such authority. Question. Who actually encouraged you to undertake the role within the FUNC? Response. It seems that General Duong Samol, although he was old, but he befriended me well, and as I respected him well, he designated that role to me. And usually I am the person who rarely denied any requests put to me. And also the security role was not that major in China. I am not a kind of a playboy person or roughneck person. Thank you. Now I move on to another topic regarding the strategy of the CPK. The President, the time is now appropriate for a short recess. We will take a 20-minute break and we shall return at 3 p.m. Court officer, could you assist the witness and the duty counsel during the break and have them returned at 3 p.m.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ